All right. Welcome, everybody, to an episode, not really an episode, but kind of a deep dive into Tartaria. Myself, Joan of Angels, we are going to go absolutely amazing information that we've been discovering as of late. I'll let Dr. Joan start because I know she's excited for this. I am too. It's just so much stuff. And we're going to actually go over a little bit of what we believe is Tartaria and why it's important. So, Dr. Jonah, you go first.
Rob, it's so exciting to see you this morning. I'm thrilled. You know, when we were on one of our last programs and I mentioned Tartaria to you, you were so dismissive of it. Okay. It was like, oh, I checked out. I spent 30 minutes reviewing it. It just like, it's like a big nothing. And so you stirred in me this desire to awaken you. Okay. It's the only way I could say it because that's why we're here. It's like I said, oh my God, I really need to get Rob engaged. And I don't know why. It wasn't that I thought, oh, I want to do a show with you. It was like I need to engage him. You need to know this for some reason. And I remember sending you that video, and then suddenly you're excited about it. So the reason I feel we're doing this is that something has been going on our planet since the beginning of time, and we are the only ones who don't know it. Humanity has been kept in the dark about who we are, what we are, where we came from, who are these controllers, what the heck has been going on. And I know, having been a therapist and a consultant and a coach, a psychic, that people go crazy when they don't know their history, when they're not connected, when there's so many secrets that at some point it overwhelms them. And so I sent this to you with the hope that somehow you'd wake up to it. And now we're here. And it's important because it's happening again for humanity. They're suddenly removing our books. They're taking away, they're censoring not just history, not just medical information, but all things that relate to the fact that we have a very different past than what they're doing. So I feel like in order to break our programming, that massive mind control programming that people have in order to awaken, this deep dive into Tartaria is important because I feel a lot of our roots are in here. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, and you're right. At first I was a bit skeptical of it because I had looked into Tartaria, but I always talk about thresholds and how when something becomes engaged or you hear something specific in there, it tends you to want to go deeper. And I'm so glad I did too because I had looked into it before and I did do a presentation on it, and I knew that there was kind of something more to it, but I couldn't get my fingers around it. And you sent me that video, and it did kind of like I saw a lot of what I believe to be truths in that video. And I always say on my shows too that if you don't know where you come from, whether man or woman, you're a person lost. And we
Yeah.
see that, we have a lot of this with Atlantis and Lemuria and these societies and these civilizations that are just lost in time and they're just gone, right? And I felt like after watching that video that this is another one of those cases, but I believe that this is a lot. It spans a lot longer than some of those other, than we know about. But we can actually get our fingers around the evidence that this was exactly what we think it is. And I've found once I dived in so much information that right off the bat I sent you a few things, and then keep looking further and further, and I'm finding connections to Britain, Scandinavia, Ireland, Egypt, the Mongols. I mean, I'm finding that this was a civilization that spanned the entire world. There was cells everywhere. There were cities from North America all the way over to Asia, to Africa, and possibly Antarctica. And here's the real crazy part is that this is still relevant information right now. It's not just what it was back then. It's still relevant right now. We need to understand who they were, what they did, what they also brought to the table, and why they brought it to the table. And I think that this is going to be a series of types of shows or smaller episode type television that we can examine each one of these areas a little bit finer and a little bit more and keep diving and diving until we get an actual full understanding of what was the potential of this society and why it's so important that we know it.
No, that's exactly the point. So as I look at Tartaria and I look at the areas to explore, the first thing that really comes to mind is well, they call it like forbidden cities, mythical cities, okay? Cities that we've been told existed in only in mythology. And I'm really talking about Shambhala. I'm talking about underground cities. I'm talking about advanced cities that they even found throughout the United States, hidden along with the other native population. So these civilizations, Rob, especially Tartaria, they say that Tartaria could have actually been the Jubilee that happened. It was about 1,000 year reign when we actually had sound energy. We had energy that harnessed sound and light frequency and vibration and water to harness free energy around the world. So where people talk, the one thing I want to emphasize is that for people is that Tartarian was an advanced civilization where we had, yes, we had very tall people, we had giants in that civilization. We had the most extraordinary architecture in that civilization that to this day, I don't think humanity can actually do. And you'd see these amazing buildings that are set in a setting where there's primitive wagons and dirt roads. Okay, so there's a lot of evidence to using advanced technology of free energy, Tesla technology. There's evidence of electric cars and electric flying devices that already existed here on the planet. So it's not a myth, it's really reality, as well as evidence that we can show over the next few months of the giants that roam the earth, and not just little giants, not just 14 feet giants, but giants that were tall enough to cut down mountain trees that are now mountains, or beings that were so tall and big and large that they are now fossilized structures that we can see, rocks and fossilized. So there's so much evidence, Rob, that something has gone on. And I just feel like they were doing what we aspire for New Earth to be doing.
Absolutely. And just to go back to that fossilization of these giant beings, they have pictures of what looks like a leg that they cut into that is petrified to rock, and the inside of that rock is bright red, and the outside is a tannish color. So there is definitely something. I mean, of course, science will try and explain that away, but the way that it looks is it looks like petrified blood inside of a leg. Like that's what it gave me the feeling of. And I think when we look at what history tells us, that that's kind of where I started. I went to the history books to see what they were saying and why they were saying it, because from there I'm able to look at and find the inconsistencies of what we're talking about. So if we're talking about the history that you're going to see in the mainstream, and this is not saying that this is the true history of it, but this is kind of where we start, right? And I always start like that too, because I want to make sure that when I'm looking at this information, I'm finding other narratives as opposed to what the mainstream is saying. That's how I kind of know I'm getting towards the right path. So they say that this is a civilization, if you look back, that, basically was in the Russia, Mongolia terrace of Asia, and that from there it was only raining for 1,000 years, and from that 1,000 years it was gone. Now, when we look further,
Completely gone. The buildings remain, but the people are gone.
right, right. So it's a we've seen this pattern before, right? So the first thing we say is we've seen this in the Mayas, the Incas. They're just gone, gone, gone. And one of the things that gets me, that strikes me so evident, is that not only was there, if we look at the structures that they left behind, there is presence of these structures everywhere. They're all built almost the same way across the world. And that leads me to believe that it wasn't just to that Asian continent area. Now, why would you pick that place to have really as a hub? It's because there's mountain ranges where you can protect your cities, And also, if you're going to be outside of the mainstream around the area and time that this was supposed to be, was the Middle East and the Crescent Fertile Valleys, and they stayed far enough away that they could interact but not be a part of. And that shows me that there's more to that story too. And that's kind of where I started my venture into what I believed was Tartaria, and how we go into this major shift to the Americas and indigenous peoples into the Americas from that point, because they talk about the land bridge and how Native Americans came across on that land bridge. They would have had to pass the Tartarian Empire at that point, because it does span that far back. And
Right.
even the ancient Greeks have Tartarian buildings, which means that they predate the Greeks. There's Sumerian buildings that are Sumerian tablets that they talk about these structures that are Tartarian structures, which shows that they go from as far back as the Sumerians up to right now, because we see these structures in San Francisco being built today, or not those types of structures, but I want to say, symbolically, they're the same structure. They're not built exactly the same way, but they're replicas, I guess we could say, would be the best way to put it. So right there shows you that this civilization is well over 13,000 years old, and it was only supposed to last for 1,000 years. And that's
Over
kind of where it started.
13,000.
At
Over
least, at
13,000.
least, at least. But I'm saying, because we find that mainstream 12,500 year, gestation period of the human beings that we see in mainstream history. But we see that it spans well greater than that by a long shot. But, just to go by their standard, that's what we see.
Very, very interesting. And I have two slides I want to show on some of the ancient buildings. So I think you guys would like this. Let's see if I can actually show them. Yes, I'm going to, and this is why I want to show them right now. Can you see that?
Sure can.
Yeah. Okay, good. So this is what we're talking about, folks. So you can have a visual. These are ancient buildings. These look Indian or Far Eastern, but this is technically was built from the top down. We do not inside of a mountain. So somehow they had technology to go inside and carve this out for us. There's no way that we can do that today. Okay, this doesn't happen in our. I'm going to show you this other one.
While
Let's
you're pulling
see.
that up, just think about it. They would have to know how they could keep the top of that mountain up while still being able to, you know, carve out the inside, which is kind of wild, which is wild.
Well, look at this. Okay, there's no way that we have technology today. We can barely excavate these things that look so good, but we don't have technology to build that. And Rob, what hits me is that I've been seeing this under my eyes forever. So for me, like in Sedona, I remember going on this tour of this amazing area, and I could see ancient temples. I'm looking at it, and these rocks are exactly like ancient temples. I see ancient, looks like sculptures. My imagination's going wild, because to me it looks so alive and so real. And I've been looking for a long, I was going to say I've been looking for centuries to find out why it looks so real, or why when I look at massive rock formations on top of mountains that I look at and I go, oh my God, that just looks like some major master being, huge, laid down on top of that mountain and died.
I think I know
Lord
exactly what
knows.
you're talking about. On the side like this, right? It's kind of like on a upward slant, and it looks like he's curled up in almost a fetal position and just laid down.
Yes, or other instances. So here where I live well, first of all, in Sedona, it's very easy to see those faces in the mountains. And now the research that I've been reading, and I think next time we'll actually have a lot of photos to show, but the research is showing that these were ancient giants that were fossilized. They even have ancient mermaids. Okay, I have seen photographs. Apparently, when you look at the earth from above, you can see the truth. And I have come across fossilized mermaids in the water, fossilized elephants that were massive. Now, we're not talking about the size we have today, because we know, we can even see it in the Bible, that humanity became shorter and shorter. Lived less years, and they actually became shorter till they're our height, but they used to be much taller, and so tall, I mean, huge, that when they cut down a tree, it became a mountain. So it's very fascinating to me. But they found all these animals that are also fossilized, that are fossilized insects, fossilized mammals. So there's so much more going on, and I think that this is a good way to start to expose it.
I totally agree. And one of the things that I also found while doing a little bit of my research is the corroboration of points of interest between other ancient texts and what we learn to be the history of Tartaria, and they line up, which is another fascinating point, because if we're looking at something to be like vetted information, we look for it to reoccur, like the mud flood. The mud flood was a tremendous point in time for the Tartarians, as well as, the other cultures around the world. So we see evidence of that. And we see evidence of that with these other cultures as well. And it ends up becoming this picture. And one of the things that I also find to be extremely red flag is the CIA was positioned and told through declassified documents to destroy any evidence of Tartar or Tartarian Empire that they had on hand. That to me is one of the most compelling pieces of evidence, because what do we know as of right now? We know that Tartaria was worldwide. It was not just a
Yes.
culture, it was worldwide. We know Tartaria was technologically advanced. Yes, by their buildings and what we see them carving out in mountains. We know that Tartarians were spiritually advanced. We know that too, right? We know that they lived longer and were bigger than we are now. Yes. So that's 5 issues that we can corroborate across the board, which means that there is there's a deep dive into every area. And I love how we're kind of just prefacing what we're going to be doing now, because when we go into free energy, it's going to be a whole lot of information. We don't want to overburden you with all these aspects right now. When we go into what types of peoples or the cultural aspects, that's going to be a lot of information. When we start talking about the world fairs and how they started to surface at the world fairs, the Tartarians were coming out, or the ancestral lineage of the Tartarians, and talking and giving everybody this information. It's going to be a lot of information. And we also know about in a place in Appalachia where there was this group of people who lived in the mountains. Their name is always on the tip of my tongue, but I can't remember it at this time. They have direct lineage to these people too, because of what they believed. We also can go into the esoteric symbolism of what Tartaria was: the eagle, the dragon, the owl, the flags, why they were meant to be those flags. They all, across the entire board, every flag was yellow. What does that symbolize? Why would they put that up there? And at that time, not a lot of countries were using yellow as their banner flag. So there's a lot of mysteries to tackle.
Yes, I want to add a few comments to
Go
that.
ahead.
Okay. I love that you brought out that there are things that are already concrete evidence. One of the mysteries is those thousands of infants that they were put up for adoption and that were in these incubators at the World's Fair. It's like, where do you get thousands of unaccompanied infants that you put in these incubators and sell at a World's Fair? So already, and we also have evidence of up to 1 million or possibly more orphans throughout Europe and the United States that were literally sold as slave labor across the world. And it's interesting. I have a lot of friends whose parents were adopted. And that's kind of my generation. My parents were born in the early 1900s. And so I have friends whose parents were just that old as well. And like parents who've been adopted. So a lot of history that has gotten lost. But I want to also say something. We have history. We have evidence of a great reset that's happened several times. And if we go back to the flood, Noah's Ark and the flood, there's really evidence that was that, and this is what's so scary. There's really evidence, and it was in that video I sent you, that that was one of the first resets that had to do with the fact that there was a mixing of blood, of pure bloods. You know, there was a mixing of the bloods between the Anunnaki gods and the humans, and they gave birth to giants. They gave birth to beings that had these other genetics in it. But there's just history that once the gods, like beings, mated with humanity, they actually had now impure blood. And that was one of the reasons for the reset at that time. That Enki or Enlil, I think it was Enlil, who said we have to destroy humanity. But they're doing it again now. They don't call it that, but they're doing it again now. We're in the middle of another global reset. And there's evidence of the last one having happened just a few hundred years ago. So very important to be alert to and starting to identify, well, if we're not killing ourselves, who is? What is going on? What do we know about these controllers, as Erwanon calls them? I don't quite know how to pronounce his name, but, you know, and it's because it's happening now.
You know, and that's another aspect is the contact aspect and the extraterrestrial component to the whole thing as well. And if these people were the direct descendants of some sort of lineage of Anunnaki, which is why, if and when, let's say that the Greeks were looking towards Mount Olympus, maybe Mount Olympus was a Tartarian city and these people were just bigger than they were, so they called them the gods. This is how important that some of this information is, and that's what we're seeing. And another fascinating aspect is the extra continents past Antarctica and how we get into
Yes,
that aspect of it. And, you know, the ice wall and is the potentiality of the Earth being flat. And all of this is categorized in Tartarian information. And that's what we mean by this. This is such a component of history, and it's so important that we divulge into all of these aspects because we're not going to sit here and tell you what to think or what it is. We're going to present the information and then you tell us. We want this to be an interactive session where we're all learning and all helping each other to learn. So, you know, I would tell everybody out there, if you're interested in Tartaria, get out there, tell us about it, tell us what you find. This is how we collectively crowdsource information and figure out
yes.
the exact timeline.
Right. So TT, the Tartarian tribe, mysteries revealed. I'm looking forward to, I think yeah, we're going to be online every other week right now until we get our groove going. And we're going to bring different aspects of this deep dive, and especially the reset components. And the other thing you mentioned is this land that's outside the ice wall. I didn't really know about any of that until recently. But I do know that I myself have seen the little people with my own little eyes. I saw a fairy one day outside, a really fairy elfin that was as tall as me outside my front door. And he looked shocked. We were both shocked, like, what? And he disappeared. And ever since then, I know that the little people exist. And I know that the giants exist. And I know that I think that there's probably civilization that is what is happening. Did you ever read the book Gulliver's Travels?
Oh yeah.
Great book. He travels around the planet, goes to God knows, he probably goes beyond the ice wall, and he comes to the land of giants and the land of little people. I am beginning to think that most of our fiction novels, many of them are true. It's the way they have taken our history, put it right in front of us in black and white, and labeled it a novel. But I've learned a lot of psychic tools, a lot of magic, and a lot of information just by reading between the lines in these books.
You know, and it's wild you say that because Joan and I were talking about trying to connect with the elders of Tartaria and meditate and see if we can connect. And I didn't quite connect to the elder, so I know so far, but I did connect to an entity that didn't want to tell me who it was, but it was pointing me in a direction and saying this information is vital. And when it said vital, it gave me a picture of a heart like a pulse, like it's the pulse of something.
Mhm.
And as we get further and further into it, hopefully I can contact this entity again. But it was giving me this information as if we keep digging, that pulse is going to get stronger and stronger and stronger, and hopefully we can unravel some of the mystery that goes behind it, and open that vein up so it's not, I don't know exactly what that symbolizes just yet, but I think it had something to do with the intensity of the information. It's vital, like a vital organ would, or vital is your pulse. So that's how I kind of perceived it's vital information. And
So you,
I want to try and do that with everybody here as a collective in one of the episodes as well, because I think it's going to be the
I was
experience is going to
thinking
be
that
awesome.
I actually had a vision, Rob, of you going into trance and me asking you the questions. And
Really?
I've that actually, yeah, I did. I had this as you were talking. I was thinking, oh my God, we got to get him in trance so that I can ask you the questions. I don't know why that came to me,
I'll
but I
try.
think
I'll try it.
now I did a kind of ceremony journey, and I found myself in a very ancient. I don't know. It was like being in a movie that was a classic period piece. And I was in a very huge drawing room. It was burgundy, lush, cushiony chairs. It was a drawing room of some kind in a different century, a different place. It was just very inviting, a fireplace in the corner. And that's it. It was red burgundy. That's all I saw,
Hmm.
basically. But very comfortable place to be. I hope to get invited back.
It's wild
Right.
that you say that red burgundy, and I saw the pulse and the blood, and that's kind of like similar color, right? And that's pretty wild. It's pretty
Well,
wild.
that's why I mentioned it. I didn't contact a being, and I think that's very, very interesting. Up, we don't have Omar today, guys. We have Rob. He kind of looks like Omar.
A little, a little. No, Omar's in the chat, I think. But you know, I
Oh,
was
are you in
really
the chat, Omar?
he
Hi,
is, he is.
Omar.
I was a
I'm
little
pretty
like
sure.
discouraged because this being wouldn't tell me who it was. And I think that maybe I wasn't ready to understand who that person was yet. So I'm going to keep trying. And when you hear that, you're like, come on, like, just, let me know. But I think I have to, I have to earn its trust a little bit more. And maybe it'll divulge some of the interesting mysteries for me. And I know my guide took me to this being. It wasn't just me contacting it. I asked my guide to help kind of intervene and help me get there because I thought it was important. So there's a lot to explore. I'm super
Yes,
excited.
I love that. Okay, this is a good tool for everyone. I want to leave everyone with this concept. Tonight, okay, today is Wednesday, June 1st. When you go to sleep tonight, all right, because I think this is perfect. I'm going to ask Rob if he'll do it tonight too, and Omar and all of you in the chat. Let's all go to bed and ask our guides to take us to Tartaria, to take us to an experience of Tartaria, information, a guide from Tartaria. I think you're right. That guide was not prepared to talk to you because they are sort of a secret group, and you actually needed a referral. You needed to be referred by a trusted source. I've never heard that happen in this world of beings, but I think that's true. But if you guys would help us, and tonight when you lay down in bed, ask to be taken. Ask to go on an adventure with Rob and Joan. Let's go to Tartaria. Let's see if we can ask the guides to bring us the kind of wisdom and information to show us what is relevant for us today. Because honestly, what really triggered it for me, it was when Omar and Rob and we were doing those timeline events, and we were very focused on how do we alter the timelines. And so knowing this information on Tartaria and working with it is going to open up the gates of that positive ascension timeline that we're all talking about, which is another reason it's so important.
I agree.
Okay.
I agree. And what I want everybody to do after tomorrow when you wake up, find the video on mine and Joan's YouTube channels and write in the comments what you saw. So the next time we go into one of these sessions, we can go back and look at the documented visions of everybody in the crowd, and we can
Yes.
go over that too. And it'll be a lot of fun to kind of, put it all together and paint that picture. So make sure you comment below tomorrow what you see. I know it's a lot to ask, but when you sleep tonight, do that, then come back and let us know, because it's going to immensely help us to try and pinpoint some of this information too. So, like I said, this is complete crowdsourced and interactive learning, and that's the way we want to keep it. And we want it to be ever present for everybody. We want you guys to find information, bring it in, let us know. That's how we want to do this, because it's that important that we're all on the same page when we're doing this.
Yes. And in a sense, it's like remote viewing collectively, that we're all kind of doing it collectively. We're going to ask that Rob's guide come forward and bring him more information and wisdom. So I think this is really exciting. We have a comment on from Discog. Maybe you can put it up there. He's proposing a toning event. I kind of like that as an idea, that we can actually tone collectively before we go to bed as well. And I found in a plant medicine ceremony I did where I got lost, Rob, I actually toned. And as I toned, I found myself traveling across the galaxy.
That's
So it was
incredible.
I mean, it's very effective. So toning in the cathedrals and the capital would be good. Not all of us are having access to head to those, but what if we tone tonight collectively when we go to bed? You can tone AEIOU a couple of times, eyes closed, vision, going on a trip, meeting Joan and Rob off in the great beyond.
I love that too, because
Tartaria.
that's one of the ways that they probably used their initiative to create those mountain carvings, and using different frequencies and tones to manipulate rock and things like that. That's how advanced these cultures were. So we're sort of following in their footsteps when we do that.
Mhm.
We're trying to
So,
maneuver the atmosphere in that way.
well, we are. Oh, it's so funny. So Omar has some great questions there. We're going to answer right now, Omar. But I want to say something. One of the pictures from the World's Fairs, there's a lot of pictures that show someone talking to dead people. They had these machines that somehow they were able to not just get the sound of people who had departed, but their faces would come into these. It's very Harry Potter-ish. Okay, all the magic that you would see, they could bring these beings in. Omar, the mud floods are definitely an example of Tartaria. It's an example of the rains that came, the flooding that happened, that then raised the ground around the buildings 5, 10, even 10 feet, so that the windows and the doors were cut off. So there's evidence of these mud floods across our country in every major city. I mean, everywhere except new cities.
I want to put up the advertisement thumbnail for this, which shows the mud flood aspect, where there is a complete civilization under the ground where you'll only see that top layer of it. And
Right.
when we look in mainstream history books, the mud flood, they say, and quotation fingers with that, was at a few hundred years towards the end of the empire of the Tartarian Empire in Asia. That's what they say is where it kind of resides. But we know that was just a hub for this type of culture and this civilization. So while one person, or not one person, one city may have been flooded in that way, not all were, which means that might be a little lost, and there needs to be some archaeological digs in those areas to go deeper down. But that's not for us to decide, because we're not archaeologists. But it would be nice, that's for sure.
Yes, and so I think we really have to look at that. That's one of the things to look at. And well, what happened to Tartaria? That's a process, Omar and Watchers Talk. What happened to Tartaria was a series of attacks on the civilization, literally physical attacks from other civilizations, as well as the mud floods, as well as the complete arrest for Tartarians as political dissidents or mentally insane, put into the hundreds of amazing, beautiful, repurposed buildings from Tartaria that became repurposed as mental institutions. So we have a history of having the largest, most exquisite buildings housing thousands and thousands and thousands of political slash prisoners who disagreed with what was going on. We understand that now in today's terms because what are they planning to do with quarantine camps? So political prisoners. So they were able to wipe out the history of a complete civilization, wipe it out, destroy it. Omar, they changed the buildings so that the buildings then begin to look like churches. The buildings look like office buildings. They look like administration buildings. They've taken the beauty and all those pieces that connect to free energy away. So that's a short version of it, but it didn't happen overnight. It was a series, just like this reset for us is happening over a period of time, guys. If you look up and you see the chemtrails, okay, and there's estimates that we're going to run out of like oxygen, the sun, we won't have enough sun for our plants to grow. So that's been happening for what, 50 years, 60 years. It's a process of somehow gradually wiping us out slowly but steadily and educating us so we think it's the best thing that's happened to us.
I agree with that. There's a catalyst, and then there's a catalyst with a bunch of catastrophes, and then predictive planning and preparation to dislodge the entire history of what this civilization meant to humanity, and what that burden and that effect for so long after that, and we're still feeling the effects of that dislodging of the Tartarians, because Tartaria
Right.
is still around now, and whether we know it or not, there are societies that still hold true to those values and still have that DNA inside of them. So
Wouldn't it be fun if we can get one of them on our show?
I
Wouldn't
would love
that be
that.
fun? Some original. So, guys, we're putting out a call for Tartarians, for people who really have had that experience and can share with us what these mysteries really are. They're not mysteries. This global reset is real. We're experiencing it happening now. It's a matter of tracking and kind of looking at exactly what we do see happening and putting it all together. But remember, because we're on that ascension timeline, all of us, we're on that path of walking, creating our future. We want to incorporate some of this advanced technology, this knowledge that humanity has been extraordinary. We are, we may even be descended from these advanced Tartarian beings, many of us. And Rob, I didn't tell you this, but I have a past life memory of my brother and his wife. And it's in the 1850s, I think, in Austria, in Vienna, and going to one of the most magnificent opera houses, which now, of course, we can say might have been Tartarian buildings, and in this grand carriage and wearing these grand clothes and looking so interesting. And I realized that was a Tartarian mystery to me.
That's epic. That's epic. And a lot of these buildings, they have these like spires that look like antennae. And that's kind of their structure, where all the buildings go to one top center point, and that has a lot to do with what we know of, the energy systems of ways of harvesting the energy that's in the atmosphere and around us right now with the static, and also with lightning and things like that. So there is a ton of evidence. And when we talk about, Omar asked, what's the years? This goes back 460,000 years to the present. That's how far this really goes back. And that's just a guesstimation. That's not even really on point to the fact where I can limit it down to specific years. It's there. But I'm saying it's been about 460,000 years.
Well, see, I didn't know that. And yet, as when you start to correlate the Bible and other ancient history, then you can. So I thought it was maybe the last 1,400, 2,000 years, but and there's missing time also. So I think we're going to start with our deep dive, guys. The next live. Let us know your questions, your results, and of your own inner work, and we're going to pick it up there.
Yeah, that's going to be it. We're going to try and keep it to a half hour so they're a little bit more digestible instead of hours long. even though, we want to get the information out. I'm gonna try and prepare sort of like a presentation style for the next one, so we can kind of go over all aspects of it. And of course, Dr. Joan will be helping me with that whole thing and putting it all together. This is going to be so epic, and I'm so excited for this. And it's just, there's so much information that
Yeah.
if we sat down and did it all in one shot, this would be a 12
It'd be
hour.
overwhelming.
Yeah, I mean, we
We're
wouldn't get it
teasing
all
them.
out.
We're teasing them. And Rob, guys, if I could tell you how uninterested he was,
In the
and this
beginning,
is
yeah.
so exciting. You can, I put a little carrot in front of Rob because I just knew that this would grab. I couldn't believe it didn't grab him yet. So guys, we love you all. Rob, this is really exciting. I'm looking forward to, I think we should have a meeting before we go live. Next time,
Absolutely.
let's look at what we're going to present. And I also really do like that idea. Maybe we could do it as a remote viewing session. And when we get into that, like, let's go to using our metaphysical tools, our super consciousness tools to get confirmation and know more. So if you're game, share this out with everyone. By the way, there's lots of places to share out stuff on Tartaria with all your friends. We really appreciate it. And also subscribe, and share both of our channels, please.
Yes.
Right?
Awesome. So, that's going to be it for us this time. Keep an eye out. In 2 weeks' time, we'll have the next episode that's going to come out, and it's going to blow your mind, just like what we talked about today. So we'll see you guys next time.
Over and out.